gorgeous. Welcome to the 5th season of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kayla Smith, a holistic and integrative doctor specializing in fertility and hormone health. If you're looking for insights into hormones, fertility, and all things related, you've come to the right place. Tune in weekly as we record amazing experts in the field of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get and stay pregnant if that's your goal, as well as eliminate all your hormone-related symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season, we're focusing closely on fertility and hormone health with an amazing lineup of expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, bringing you stories and advice that will support you in your journey. We're here to lift your spirits, give you a virtual hug, inspiration, empower you, and we want you to take charge of your fertility and your health. Thank you all so much for tuning in and being amazing listeners. So now, let's get started on your road to transformation. Let's start putting those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together one step at a time. On today's show, we have Ivy Joeva. She is a fertility coach, doula, and birth educator, serving women and couples who desire a conscious path on the journey of conception, pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Bridging the gap between modern science and ancient wisdom, Ivy's approach emphasizes the mind-body connection and includes the physical, emotional, sexual, and spiritual aspects of care. She provides support throughout the childbearing years, including fertility coaching, holistic preparation for birth, postpartum recovery care, and counseling for pregnancy loss of all kinds. A graduate of UC Berkeley and the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, Ivy became a doula in 2009. She serves clients across the United States and abroad. Today, we are talking about spiritual support and fertility. Now, let's welcome Ivy to the podcast. Hey, Ivy, welcome to the podcast.
Dr. Kala, it's so wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much. And I would love to just dive right in. We have a great show for today, and we're going to talk all about spirituality and fertility and how those two intertwine. But before we do, I would love to just hear a little bit more about how you got into this work and what makes you so passionate about the work that you're doing.
Well, I started out as a birth doula back in 2009, which feels like 100 years ago. And through my work in the birth room, I really found that the journey of pregnancy and birth begins far before a mother even conceives. And so it was really an organic evolution of supporting women and couples throughout the childbearing year, as I do now. And realizing that, secondary infertility is actually quite not as uncommon as we would think. And so I would have women who I had supported in birth come back and be experiencing pregnancy loss, which I would support them through, and sometimes fertility challenges from then on that I would also be supporting them through. And so through my journey at Institute of Integrative Nutrition, which is an integrative nutrition school, I started to really learn about the connection between our overall health and wellness and our fertility. And even beyond that, the health of our environments and our personal wellness, which I think is something that's really overlooked in the medical model.
For sure. I know. And that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was because I want to bring those two worlds together because it is so overlooked. I feel like nutrition is just not really brought into the equation. And so I'm so glad we're kind of talking about this now, and it's becoming more of a topic of conversation. So I love that. And so we're going to talk about spirituality and fertility. And so just talk to us for a minute about the spiritual aspects of fertility. What can we think of when we think of these two things together?
Well, it's interesting that so many of us don't think of these two things together, because fertility is something that's inherently spiritual, because what we're talking about is bringing into the physical world something that is not yet physical. And that's what spirituality is. It's the part of us that is physical and also beyond the physical. It's that integration of matter and spirit. And that is essentially what conception is. It's bringing in something that is not yet in existence. So with a spiritual approach to fertility, we want to be looking at the whole person and not segmenting ourselves. And too often in conventional medicine, we're looking specifically at tests and charts and numbers and graphs and plugging a physical human body into those things without regard to how this person feels, what her fears are, what her deepest desires are, what the quality of experience is along the way, which always informs the outcome, right? And so fertility through a holistic lens or spiritual lens is really about, I like to call it soulful fertility. Mm-hmm. And what is the soul? It is that which encompasses all of us. It's our essence. Beyond the physical body, and an embodiment is part of our soul, but we can't sever that from the totality of who we are.
I completely agree with that. And I love that we're talking about this because my training was in quantum physics, and it's, the spiritual and the intuition piece and all of that is first before the physical. The physical is last. And so it's really a different way of kind of looking at the body. And I love that you say bringing all the pieces together, because it's mind, it's body, and it's spirit. And all of those pieces need to be, working in harmony to create life. And so I love that you say that. And you talk about intuition, and I talk about intuition a lot. I think it's a big part of just health and holistic health and getting pregnant in general. But talk to us about that. How do we deepen our intuition, and how do we even learn to tap into this?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question for our time, because we're living in the information age, right? And information exists in the realm of the known. And so many of us are almost addicted to knowing things. We want to know something, and what's the first thing we do? We whip out our device, right? Or go on Dr. Google and try to know it. And intuition exists in the realm of the unknown, which can be very scary. It's the groundlessness, right? It's being willing to go into the void, this darkness. In mythology, some would say the underworld, which is what terrifies us the most, the aspect of death, right? And so through a spiritual lens, fertility is really looking at that void, that is the fertile space. How does anything grow on this earth? It grows from the depths of the earth, right? If we're looking at the plant kingdom, for example. So there's this need to unify our psyche from not just the known, but also being comfortable in more of the wild spaces, the uncharted spaces. And so how do we do that? We do that with practice. We do that with building our capacity to be in the questions and the wonder. If we look at like a little baby or a small child, they're constantly in awe of the world around them because everything is new, everything is unknown. And so being willing to go into the unknown, this void, the dark, fertile earth, so to speak, from a metaphorical perspective, is very much bringing the spirit of fertility to life in our bodies, and our mind and our bodies are connected. This as a holistic doctor. So being willing to be in that open-minded space of, I don't know, being willing, that is such a radical choice in a world, and particularly with fertility, where for many of us, it brings up our fears, which is really real, the psychological pain of that. And so what do? We grasp for answers. And if there were for sure answers, that would be one thing. But what we know is that very often, in many cases, there are going to be unknowns. There is an element of mystery in it, no matter how many tests we run, no matter how many experts we consult. And so at the end of the day, we can't really escape this need to go deeper into ourselves. And so to give, some concrete guidance around that, I would say going into the body, like really connecting with your feelings, is a huge part of connecting with intuition, connecting with your heart, connecting with your womb space, connecting with reality, because so many of us live in this world that is, the world of technology, which is not actually real in terms of what our bodies recognize as real. And so if we can connect more with nature and silence, that's where that deeper knowing starts to come in, that knowing that seems like it's coming from nowhere, but it's super clear. And so it's really like building a muscle, learning to trust that. And it becomes stronger when we use it.
I love that. And I completely agree. And I think too, one thing I like to point out to a lot of my patients and listeners is that fertility is, some of it's what you do, but it's a lot of letting go and just sitting in your feminine energy and just being. And like you said, trusting in that and trusting that this is all going to work out. You might not know how yet, but it will work. And so just trusting in that, I think, is important, because I know, like, in my fertility journey, I was pushing, like, I'm type A, like, let's do this. I'm going to make this happen. And that didn't work for me. And I had to just let go and just kind of say, okay, I'm going to do what I can, but then I have to trust that it's going to work out the way that it should.
And what was helpful for you? How did you manage to, because I think for so many people, they even know they want to surrender. Like, once someone gets to that point where they know this is what I need to do, but it can be so scary because it feels like giving up control of what I want more than anything in the world. So how did you bridge that gap for yourself?
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I created my whole metaphor around the hormone puzzle, is that I wanted to wake up every morning and think, okay, what can I focus on? And so puzzle was the things that I focused on: my nutrition, my fitness, my lifestyle. But then on the other side of that, I also would then just say, okay, I'm doing what I can, and now I need to trust that it's enough. And then I would meditate, and I would go out in nature, and I would pray. I'm Christian. I believe in God. I would pray to God and just really trust in this whole journey. And so I think it was a little bit of like, I know I'm doing what I can, but then I'm going to also let go and surrender and know that this is going to happen when it's supposed to. And it did. And I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen for everyone, but that was my experience. And I see a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I think you bring up such an important element of spiritual fertility, because even just the word spirituality, I think, in this day and age scares some people who've been raised in really perhaps strict religious homes, and they feel a little traumatized from the dogmatic elements of religion. But I do find that in order to let go, in order to surrender, we have to be able to trust something that's holding us, something bigger than ourselves. And so for some may relate to that as God, for some may relate to that as the universe or the spirit of eternal unconditional love. For some people, it might be their connection to nature, where they get that sense of connection and meaning. But I think that when you ask, how do we start to recognize our intuition and lean into our tuition, being willing to let go enough to even connect with our intuition requires that we feel held by something greater than ourselves. And so finding that source of connection, however you go in, is really a critical piece. And I think that one of the wounds that many of us carry, particularly as women, around spirituality, is that we have been raised in a patriarchy, where patriarchy has taken over many religious faiths. And so that manifests as like a disconnection between our spirituality and the sacred temple of our bodies. And so I like to remind people that our bodies are our sacred temple, and you are the priestess. And so in the same way that we can pray to the beyond, we can pray to God, we can pray to the universe, we can also pray in to our very own sense of holiness inside ourselves, so to speak.
I love that. And I love that you point out too that, I think no matter what your religion is, we can all agree that there is something greater than us out there. And so you have to find what is that for you and lean into that. But I also love that you say lean into yourself, because that's super important too. Going inward, I feel like a lot of us are outward many, many times, where going inward can be very helpful. So I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think particularly for people, there are people who, and I have so much respect for people who really question, like, is there something beyond? Is it all, because at the end of the day, it's a mystery. None of us know. Like we have our deep inner knowing, but it's outside the realm of the intellect of debating what, we can't prove these things with science. And so for those people who are very much needing that proof, I would say this is even more of an invitation to connect with what you know in your body to be true. Because we know that we're not going to find that. We're not going to find all of it in external information.
For sure. And so you talk about spirit babies. So let's go there next. What is a spirit baby and how do we connect to ours?
Well, our spirit baby is the spirit of our baby before they come into physical form. So everything in the world before it was physical, there was an unseen version, right? When we plant a seed in the earth, we envision this is going to be a plant. All the information that is necessary for that little seed to become a plant is already in the seed. And so on a soul level, we have an imprint of what our life can be, that potential for our life. And when I say spirit baby, I like to think of it as a soul baby. It is your connection to this unseen realm that you already have within you, just by virtue of that desire for a child and to be a mother. We don't know what that physical manifestation is going to look like, if it's going to be a girl, if it's going to be a boy, how that soul is going to come in. But in connecting with this unseen realm, there's a couple ways we can go about it. One is to be in the silence, be in the mystery, and really hear what comes. For many people, there is a deep connection with their unborn children. For many, they don't hear anything. And it's important to know that there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It's just an invitation to be in that silence and to hold the invitation for that connection. And one of the ways that you can know that you're connecting is there's going to be a voice that sounds different than your own. And oftentimes it is the voice of unconditional love. That is very much the voice of the spiritual realm. It's not good or bad. It's there is an equanimity to it. And one of the gateways in that I also recommend is noticing that younger version of ourselves and how are they doing inside. Because on the path to motherhood or parenthood, we each still have a little one inside that very often is running the show, especially when they don't get their needs met. And so I find in my work with clients that sometimes that can be a bit of what's in the way to stepping fully forward into motherhood. This is just kind of in the invisible barrier realm where we haven't yet learned to make peace with that little one inside. And our soul babies need that from us because they know, as a mom that when you have that child, we're going to be up against our own blocks in terms of how far we've been able to come reparenting that little one inside that needs our nurturing. That's what's going to get triggered when we have a child who's asserting their will or, really challenging us because their needs maybe are not being heard in some way.
For sure. I love that. And I love too, I've had guests in the past on talking about this and they like to point out that you want to almost like you're putting out the energy so that the spirit babies are, watching and trying to see who that they connect with. And then you're kind of calling them in. So I thought that was a beautiful analogy, just thinking like my spirit baby's up there. Like, do I want to talk to them? Do I want to, show them this beautiful life that they're coming into and the type of mother that I'm going to be? And I just think it's beautiful to kind of think about it in that lens and know that they are watching and that they will come down soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can be part of really building the trust in the unknown is to know that we don't have to wait for that connection that we're longing for. It's available. And there's nothing really to connect to out there. Your soul baby, when they are conceived, is going to be a part of your body if you are carrying the pregnancy yourself. And on a soul level as well, their heart is in your heart. When a woman is pregnant, the baby's heartbeat is a part of her own bloodstream. There's a beautiful synchronicity between her heart and the baby's heart. And so that's true on a soul level as well.
I love that. I love that. What a great conversation. And I could keep going all day, but we do have to take a break. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors. We're going to come back and we're going to talk more practical tips on what we can do in these moments to kind of optimize our fertility through that lens of spirituality and emotional health. So we'll be right back. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back shortly, but first, let's hear a word from our amazing sponsor. Trust me, it's something you'll definitely want to hear, especially if you're passionate about fertility and hormone health. Did you know we have our exclusive herbal tea crafted especially for fertility, hormones, and reproductive health? This isn't just any tea. It's a nurturing blend of 5 potent herbs, each chosen for their unique ability to support fertility and hormone balance. Imagine the benefits of red raspberry, nettles, calming chamomile, antioxidant-rich green tea, white peony, and the delightful rooibos vanilla, all in one soothing cup. This delicious, nutritious tea is perfect for starting your morning or relaxing in the evening. So why wait? Head on over to our website, www.hormonepuzzlesociety.com/fertility-tea to support your fertility journey in the most natural and enjoyable way. Now let's get back to our insightful episode and continue our hormone puzzle journey together. Hey, Ivy, welcome back.
So good to be with you.
So let's talk about those practical tips. What are maybe your 5 top things that we can do right now to optimize our fertility as we're looking through that spiritual and emotional lens?
Yeah. Well, the first one is something that you share so beautifully, which is really about connecting with our bodies and really ending this division between our spiritual life, which can be something called spiritual bypass, where we're relating to spirituality as though it's somehow disconnected from our lives and from our physical bodies. And so really remembering that our physical bodies are sacred and they're our sacred temple, and we are the priestess of this temple. And so that's kind of ground zero for a spiritual approach to fertility, is merging the spiritual with the physical. So that's step 1. Step 2, I would say, really connecting with our feelings, connecting with our heart and our emotions, which is such a critical part of a holistic approach to fertility. Because again, we've kind of been taught to go into our minds and bypass how we're actually feeling in reality, which is an embodied experience. So reconnecting with our hearts. And this is, of course, also connected to our sexuality, because in the process of trying to conceive, so many people become disconnected from sexuality. Fertility and sexuality are obviously connected. This is how we conceive for thousands and thousands of years. And so even if we are using reproductive assistance, we don't want to disconnect from this essential part of ourselves. And so coming back into our hearts and our feelings, reconnecting with our womb space, not on a theoretical level, but an actual embodied experience of feeling into these areas in our bodies, is essential. And then beyond that, one of the things that I think can be really supportive for bringing us back into our bodies and into our feelings is connecting with Mama Earth and recognizing that, this illusion that we're somehow disconnected, we're these creatures walking on top of the earth, but somehow disconnected from her. I think there's a lot of suffering in that delusion, right? Because it's not reality. And really, to thrive as a being, we need to feel connected. And so how can we do this in practical ways? Of course, being out in nature can be a really pleasurable thing for many people. Some people have access to more spaces in the outdoors than others. I lived in New York City for many years, so, you definitely have to work a little harder to find it in certain settings. But one of the ways that I'm sure you talk about that can be really beneficial for our cycles. So obviously some of us will have a harder time getting into the beauty of nature than others. I myself lived in New York City for many years, and the only place I could really go for refuge was this rock in Central Park. And I used to go and just sit on this rock just to feel connected to the earth. And I could notice immediately, like as soon as I got my body on this rock, it was like my whole nervous system started to downregulate and relax. And so I imagine you probably talk about the importance of our circadian rhythm and light. And so, even if we don't have access to a place like the beach or the mountains or, beautiful expansive spaces in nature, to really notice what's happening with the natural light and get our bodies and our eyes out into the light. That can be a wonderful way of harmonizing our bodies with the earth, both the sunlight and the moonlight. And of course, something that can take us away from this if we're flooded with artificial light day and night, right? So we just want to be aware of this connection. And that could be in subtle ways or bigger ways of actually taking a trip and putting your body out in nature. Or something as simple as opening your window and really feeling that connection between you and your environment, breathing in a nice deep breath. Mm-hmm. We talked a bit about connecting with your soul baby or spirit baby. I think this can be a beautiful way of bringing in the spiritual element of fertility, to just recognize that this connection does not begin the moment you conceive. It's something that is with you. It's in your heart. And there are some cultures that believe that a child is conceived when they are first a thought in their mother's mind.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I love
that.
So,
it's interesting when we look at how different religions have interpreted this connection with our babies. In Judaism, for example, a baby is considered its own being when it takes its first breath and not before. Prior to that moment of inspiration, that's when they say the spirit comes into the baby. The baby's just a part of the mother's body, right? We know in Christianity, they talk about life coming into the child at the quickening, right? When the babe leapt in their mother's womb, when Mary was talking to her cousin Elizabeth. Other Christian denominations believe that the spirit enters the baby at the moment of conception and even before implantation. So this really goes to show what a mystery it is, because we all have different ideas. Everybody's very determined that they're right about this. And so why not start connecting now? Why not really start bridging your heart and your womb space and your love for your baby now? And so that brings me to the fifth idea, I would say, that can be really supportive in bringing in this element of spirituality to your fertility journey, which is connecting with the quality of unconditional love. Some would call it God. Some would call it the great mystery or life herself. But that is the language that I find spirit babies speak. And you really know you're connecting with your baby on that soul level when you're communicating from a place of unconditional love and when you're really receiving those messages back.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I love all of those tips. And I talk about a lot of them on the show and completely agree. And I wanted to dive into one, we talked about this a little bit in the first half, but the mind-body connection and how powerful that is. And I just think it plays an important part of this conversation. So any tips around that? How can we connect to that mind-body piece?
Yeah, I think the first and most important part is to just recognize that they're not separate. Mm-hmm. Because so often we actually relate with our bodies as if they're this thing that we're going to do things to them and somehow get a result, and I think that particularly in the realm of fertility, we really can see this exaggerated, where it's like, I'm going to take this thing and then I'm going to, take this medication and then this result is going to happen. And, in indigenous cultures, in shamanic tradition, for example, you do not partake in medicine. You do not partake in plant medicine without cultivating a relationship with the spirit of that plant. And so it's really interesting to see this become adopted in Western cultures and kind of popularized in our culture today, where we're taking plant medicine, but we're relating to it as we would relate to a pharmaceutical in conventional medicine. Like, I'm going to take this thing and somehow get healing or enlightenment, right? And that's actually not how our bodies work, because our intention, and, we know this from Western medicine, that the placebo effect works 80% of the time. That is extraordinary. If I could sell you a pill and say this works 80% of the time, that's a really powerful drug. And so just recognizing that your intuition and the spirit in which you're participating in anything with your body, whether it's exercise, whether it's food, this is why it can be really beautiful to bless our food, not from a place of I should do this because somebody told me to, but from a place of an actual embodied experience of intimacy with the life force energy that I'm about to bring into my body to nourish me and revitalize me. So I think really just recognizing that they are not separate, that we are not separate from our minds and our bodies, and really starting to honor how we actually feel in the process as inextricably connected from what we will experience in our bodies.
For sure. And I think that goes back to the belief in what I'm doing is going to work, and I'm going to believe that things are going to work out, because it's, I don't want to say it's a placebo, but it kind of is, because it's that belief in that this is going to work, and then it does. And it's so cool, because I'll see this in my own practice where patients will come to me and, we'll have our first call before we're working together, and they'll tell me like their cycles are missing, or they've been trying to get pregnant for this many years and blah, blah, blah. And even before we have our first call, because they believe that they're going to invest in this program and it's going to work, things start happening before we even start to do any of the physical pieces. And I think it's that mind-body connection, that belief that, I have a plan, somebody's going to help me, and then the body just starts to take over, and that connection is so strong. So I love that you say that, and it's so cool, and I see it every day, and it really still just blows my mind.
It's so powerful, and it's really something that we can't override. It's something that we can't bypass, in the sense that I imagine why you experience with this with your clients is because something in them that they listened to knew that they were being powerfully guided to partner with you in this journey. And so they have that trust. It's not something they're telling themselves. We can't force ourselves to believe something and then have those results. It's actually that belief is something that is experienced in the body. And so we're recognizing, oh, this feels like my medicine.
For sure. For sure. And I love that you say that too about plants, because it's so cool. We have a sunroom that's filled with plants, and I'll go in there and I'll talk to the plants because I want them to grow and thrive. And my husband's like, you're crazy. Like, the plants can't hear you. And I'm like, yeah, they can.
Yeah, they can.
So I love that you said that, and it's so true. So let's switch gears a little bit. I know we've been talking a lot about practical tips for the women, but what about the men, the male partners? Does all of this apply to them as well when it comes to their fertility and their spirituality?
I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I feel like so often in this journey, the male partners are seen as kind of there to come along for the ride. And we know from the data, they're actually half the equation. So when there are fertility challenges, the studies show it is 1/3 of the time it's on the female side. 1/3 of the time we don't know, or it's a combination, or it's, cause unknown is quite common. And then a whole third of the time it is the problem lies on the male side. So just as frequently as as the female side. And I, as a doula and birth educator, I really see often there too, so much focus is put on the mother in preparing for birth. And we're expecting partners to show up in the birth room and, be able to be comfortable in this space, but we're not really including them in these conversations. And so, fortunately, I feel like we're finally seeing fertility doctors start to put more due consideration on the male side because the data is out. But on a spiritual level and from a holistic perspective, I think very often our partners want to make us happy, right? And that's a beautiful, beautiful quality. But what can often happen is they can sidestep their own true feelings, their own true fears, their own true desires, their own actual barriers, right? I call them invisible barriers, but we each have these fears that coincide with our deepest desires. And very often the stronger the desire, the stronger the fear. And the more we try to bypass that or sweep it under the rug, the more it's going to run the show. Our unconscious is what's kind of running the show. And so a spiritual approach to fertility is really about making those unconscious or hidden places, those invisible barriers, bringing them into the light of consciousness. And so for partners, I think it's, in simple terms, I would say it's really important to tell the truth about how you're feeling and not self-immolate out of this belief that that's how you can be supportive to your partner. Because on some level, female partners can feel when we're not on the same page, and we might want something so badly that we just keep doggedly pursuing it and leave our partner in the dust. But from a spiritual perspective, that soul baby knows how both of their parents are feeling. And so I think that, having those open conversations, really honoring each other's timing, and when it is misaligned, being honest about that, being really honest with ourselves about that. And I think also for partners who are trying to support their partner, because it will be the female body that's going through many of these experiences, whether it's a pregnancy loss, whether it's, the hormones that are associated with assisted reproductive techniques. It's a big physical experience to have. And so I think that for partners who are trying to be supportive, we need to remember the laws of physics, that if I'm trying to support a physical structure, I can only do that to the degree that I'm supported myself. And so for partners to really have circles of support, and I see this particularly with male partners, because I think we live in a culture where we tell men, buck up, grow up, stand up, you're supposed to be strong all the time. And so we don't really have a model for men to be in connection with other men where they're able to let their guard down and be vulnerable and be safe and be held and supported. And our partners need that just as much as we do.
For sure. For sure. And I love that you mentioned about communication, because I think that's so important, because none of us are mind readers. We need to know what the other person needs. I think that is super important. And I also agree with just helping the male partner find that support system in that community. And I'm so glad now more than ever, there's more support in the fertility community around the male partners. And so that's great. 10 years ago, when I started my journey, or 12 years ago, it wasn't like that at all. So it's so important. And I'm glad it's becoming more of the norm. So I love that you say that. And I love this conversation, but we do have to start to wrap up. So first, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you for that.
It's my honor and pleasure to be with you, Dr. Kayla. I just so appreciate the wonderful, wonderful work you're doing, making a holistic approach more available for people, because it's so needed right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And before we close out, we have a couple more things to do. I want to play a fun little game if you're open, so I can let my audience know more of your personality. Are you open to that?
Sure, absolutely.
So the way that it works, I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
All right. So favorite food?
Watermelon.
Least favorite food?
Oh, so tough because I just love food, but I would say the least favorite would have to be something I don't eat, which is pork. I don't eat pork and pork products.
Gotcha. Favorite book?
Oh, there's a really good book on my bookshelf right now called Playing with Fire. It's a book by Justin Pierce and London Winters.
Okay. Do you want to tell us the main topic?
Yeah, it is.
It's odd, but it sounds good.
I'll read you the byline is the spiritual path of intimate relationship.
Oh, okay.
It's a juicy one.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Favorite TV show or movie if you watch either of those?
Sex and the City. It's a little slow, but they've never topped it. So
classic. And then favorite quote.
Well, I love Rumi. I'm a Rumi junkie, and he says, "There's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. There's 1,000 ways to come home again." And that quote really reminds me, no matter how disconnected we become from our hearts or our true essence from our bodies, there's 1,000 ways in. And so we get to be really gentle with ourselves in finding how to reconnect in.
I love that. It's beautiful. Well, Ivy, again, it's been my pleasure to have you here. Tell us where we can find you, and you have a really special gift for our audience. So would you tell us about that?
I do, yeah. Well, you're welcome to find me on my website, which is just my name.com, ivyjoeva.com. And then I'm also often on Instagram at Ivy Joeva. And for the Hormone Puzzle listeners, I am offering a complimentary soulful fertility consultation to clarify your next steps in your fertility journey. And so this is just a 30-minute virtual consultation with me. And I'd be honored to connect and just see where you're going and what you're needing.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much for that awesome gift. We'll have all that in the show notes. It'll be really easy to find you and take advantage of that gift. So thank you for that. And as we close, any final thoughts? What's a piece of advice you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I would just say that spirituality it's such a vast and unwieldy topic. And so if this is bringing up anything for you, which I think it brings up so much for all of us, to just know that you're not alone and you don't have to do this without support. So whether you receive support from Dr. Kayla or myself, really trusting yourself and trusting your inner guidance to find what kind of support is really going to be nourishing you and holding you in your journey.
I love that. Amazing. Well, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Hey, Ivy, welcome to the podcast.
Dr. Kayla, it's so great to be here with you.
Yes, thank you so much. Hey, hang on a second. Before you go, I've got some fantastic free resources waiting for you over at our website. You can find that at www.hormonepuzzlesociety.com. You'll find everything from a fertility meal plan, a cycle optimizing quick start guide, even a pregnancy meal plan. Plus, there's masterclasses and blog posts for myself and leading experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition, all designed to support you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of unexplained infertility, but there just wasn't. That's why I put all of these resources together for you. So make sure you go and check these out and make the most of the support that I've arranged for you. And here's a little secret. These are the same strategies and foods that helped me conceive not once, but twice, even after my doctor said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. Make sure that you take advantage of that. And I can't wait for you to be our next success story. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember to visit our website at www.hormonepuzzlesociety.com for the show notes of today's episode. And if you've enjoyed our time together, please subscribe and leave us a review. I so appreciate you and thank you for being a valued listener. See you on the next episode of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Take care and lots of love.